Okay, so we're going to take a look here. This is what I'm calling the DimirDelver deck version 1.0. Now, anyone who reads the article series will understand that this is kind of a rough version. I do plan on tackling this later on because I had so much fun with this deck that I felt it had some potential to it. But if you read the article that I am putting up this week, you will find out that I am running a kind of a special series just focusing on the blue-black meta type. A bunch of blue-black decks for Pauper format, and I just wanted to showcase this one. Like I said, I will be revisiting it maybe next week even, to see if I can tune it up a little bit more. But anyways, so this is DimirDelver 1.0. We'll start with, of course, we wanted to bring in kind of both of the best parts from blue and black when it comes to creatures. Obviously going to run the Delver. The Phantasmal Bear is another creature. It's great. It's a 1-drop. It allows us to run, you see we're only running 21 lands, and we can kind of get away with that because our mana base is so slow. The biggest cost is 3. We do have the ninja at 4, but you want to be casting that for 2 anyways. So having these 8 creatures at 1 drop is pretty fantastic. You're really going to want those to be able to get your plays off on turn 1. Even if it's a bear instead of a delver you get on turn 1, that's still pretty good. You're going to be able to swing for 2 on turn 2. So we bring those into play. You're obviously going to have the ninja. It's a great draw engine. Next up would be the drake. The drake is a pretty big flying body for only a 3 cost. The only condition is that you have to remove a card from the graveyard to get it into play. Not a big deal. We are only running 2 of those though. We don't want it to be really the focus. Now as far as black is concerned, I brought in 4 of the ravenous rats and 3 chittering rats. These are going to act as part of your hand control package. The rats, I said this a couple times, the chittering rats are nice because it kind of makes your opponent skip a draw. And if you use a ninja on it, you get to use that a second time. Now, our draw package for this deck, I kind of am personally a bit heavy draw friendly. So I am running 2 Think Twice alongside 4 Preordains. Preordain is my favorite of the 1 cost draw spells because it does allow you to scry before drawing. Brainstorm is a good one, but I think it's a stronger one in other formats. I think in Pauper, Preordain is your best bet. It allows you to make the choice. Ponder is a nice one too, but like I said, Preordain allows you to make the choice. You can decide what you want to draw if you have the opportunity. It works really well with the Delver to make a couple good plays if you want to rearrange the library so that you ensure that your Delver is going to find an instant or sorcery on your next turn. Now, the next thing is with Think Twice. This is, I thought about adding accumulated knowledge, something like that, but because it's only a 2 of that I'm decided to work in here as of now, Think Twice is the best bet. You can use this even though it's not necessarily ideal in response to a Delver ability on the stack. Say you have multiple Delvers on the table. When one goes on the stack and reveals something that is not an instant or sorcery, you can, in response to the second one on the stack, cast Think Twice to draw that card off the top and give you another opportunity to hit an instant or sorcery. Just something to keep in mind. I do mention it later on in the video here, but just keep that in mind. You do have the ability to flash those back as well to get some draw off. There are other draw options, deep analysis, stuff like that, but I felt that as far as the mana curve of this deck goes, deep analysis would be way too heavy. So then I brought in the Consult the Necrosages. Now this card acts as not only choking again, not only a draw spell, but it acts as a discard spell as well. So you do have the opportunity to use that in your favor to draw cards, or you can use it to aid in the control in your opponent's hand. I did want to bring that in because it gives you both of those options. It's kind of one of those epitome of blue and black, as it sits on both sides that line there. So I really like the Necrosages in this. Perhaps in a revisit I may up the count to 3 and remove a Think Twice, but the Think Twice works nice because it's an instant. Anyways, that's for a later thought. The Necrosages, like I said, you want to be able to use those in situations. Keep attention to your opponent's hand if you think it's the right time where using that to discard is going to be ideal. That's fantastic. Another thing you can do, just a bit of tech for you, and the situation calls for it, I don't know when it'll call for it, but you may run into this situation anyway. You can use the Necrosages on yourself to force yourself to discard a creature. That will give you a couple plays that will allow you to use the Drake. If you have no creatures in graveyard, you can force yourself to discard a creature so that you can play the Drake. Or you can use it, use Unearth to bring a creature back from the graveyard that you have discarded with the Necrosages. So just something to keep in mind, that it does have options. You can use it to self-discard. Whereas as opposed to the rats, which make your opponent discard only. So then we'll bring in the counters. Any blue deck is going to run counter spells. So I brought in Mana Leak. I wanted to have a 4 set of counter spells. Now you do have some options here. You could bring in simply Counterspell. I thought the 2 blue casting cost was a little bit heavy, considering we do run a number of blacks. And this, again, may be modified later on, but for now, using this deck right here, Counterspell runs 2 blue on each cost, and having all these swamps in play is gonna kind of inhibit your ability to get that double blue. It's not gonna be terrible, but having this 1 colorless mana in the casting cost is going to allow you more opportunities to play a Counterspell. Now you do have other options as far as that's concerned. You could bring in Prohibit. I've kind of touted that card a lot. I think it is a good card for this format, but Mana Leak, I believe, will hit more options. You get an opponent who taps out to play a Crush or something like that. You will have more options with the Mana Leak. I also did consider Rune Snag. That's a card that I've kind of been getting into recently. It's like Mana Leak. It's the same cost. The first one is prevent unless they pay 2. So as opposed to your Mana Leak, it will be a little harder to get that first one into play, but it does have the option to each one ramps up, so it's 2+ for each in your graveyard. So it is a decent option, and I may give it a test run, but I think Mana Leak has a little bit of a stronger play on it because it does hit that first one for 3. So next in the counter spell package is Soul Manipulation. There is kind of an underlying creature reuse to this deck with the Soul Manipulations and the Unearths. Soul Manipulation is a counterspell. It is creature-only counterspell, however. I think it's easy to run 3 of these in this format because there are a lot of creature-heavy decks. If you do come across a control deck, even mono-blue control can be heavy creature. So it would be like the Izzet control matchup or Storm. You can easily side those out for something else. But in the main deck, I think it's a good idea for all the aggro decks that are out there. It allows you to counter a target creature spell or return a creature to your graveyard, and it is an and/or, so you do have the option to do both. So you can use that to counterspell and bring a creature back. Some of the recursion is nice with this, especially on the rats. So whenever you can, you want to use the rats, get rid of those, chump block, whatever, and you have the ability to bring those back. Now, this is the next kill spell. We were talking about all the creatures in this format. So I, of course, am bringing in Agony Warp. It's one of the coolest reasons to run blue-black. It's a pretty good kill spell. Echoing Decay is nice. It does 1 more. It is a -1 more than Echoing Decay. There you go. With Agony Warp, but Echoing Decay does kill multiple creatures at -2/-2. I think Agony Warp is a little bit better. It will only kill 1, however, it has an option to kill more because it allows for that extra reduction. And again, that may be sided out too. You do have other options with Agony Warp. Having the -3 and as attack and toughness does give you options during combat to make some plays. Block a creature and let your creature live. So you do have to be aware of that. It's not just a single spell. You can use it to split that -3 to both sides. Now, kind of an interesting add I have to this is the Unearths. Now, this Unearth will hit. It's cost 3 or less from graveyard. Brings it directly to the battlefield. This will hit every creature in your deck except for the 1 ninja. Most of the time, I kind of don't cycle these. I like to have them to use. If you do find yourself in need for a draw, outside of the Preordained, the Think Twice, and the Necrosages, then you can feel free to cycle it. But like I said, I like to hold on to it. Kind of a nice thing about this is the biggest creature in your deck is really the Drake, and I think this would be beneficial to the mono blue version. When you're playing mono blue, the Drake is again one of your biggest creatures. You do have Spire Golems, but they only have a smaller attack. So the Drake really is your biggest creature, and if it dies, they manage to get a kill off on that Drake. Say they use 2 lightning bolts, or they get a Doomblade. Then it kind of sucks. You're sitting at a little bit lower damage curve, except for perhaps the Delvers being turned. But we're focusing on the Drakes right now. So if the Drake's dead, it sucks. But if you do have Unearth, a little tip here: you can use it to rebirth the Drake. It's not back to hand, it brings it directly back to the battlefield. Now, if you read the additional cost on the Drake, it says, as additional cost to the Drake, exile a creature card from your graveyard. Now, the thing is here, it says you are using this as an additional cost to cast. Now, if you use Unearth, it brings it immediately to the battlefield, so you are not actually casting the Drake, and the Drake has the ability to just go straight to the battlefield. It will not actually cost you an additional creature. So if the Drake is your only thing in graveyard, you can use Unearth. Don't sit there and hold Unearth thinking you can't bring the Drake into play until you have a second dead creature. You can bring it directly to the battlefield when you use Unearth, because it will not cost an additional draw. It will not cost you an additional creature to get that into play. So let's take a look at the sideboard here. I did bring in, you see the Echoing Decays. If you do run into any of the Empty of the Warren Storm, Echoing Decay is pretty much good game. I've had matches against the Storm decks where they use the probe on my hand, they see that I am holding an Echoing Decay or multiple Echoing Decays, and they realize it's just game over and they'll concede. They really have no answer to it. They can't pump the toughness of their creatures. Some versions do run the Kiln Fiend. If they do, I'm not as concerned about that. They're going to I'm just going to say, blow their shot using the Warrens if they don't know about it. Another thing you can bring in for that matchup is the Crypt Rats. It is a body as well as an instant, so you can be tapped out and have that available to you. I think between the three of those, you get a pretty good handle on the surviving the Warren Storm. They don't really have a counterspell, so to speak. That I have seen, they will bring in Pyroblast, but that will not hit Echoing Decay. That'll be hitting your blue creatures and etc. So speaking of Pyroblast, we do bring in, of course, 3 of the Hydroblast. Good to side in for Izzet, good for Goblins. It acts as a 1 blue kill spell. You're of course gonna bring some of those in. Now, I also, for the Izzet matchup, I bring in 2 Rancid Earth. You could use Choking Sands as well. I picked Rancid Earth. It's really a tough call if you ask me. Choking Sands is good, but the only downside is it does not kill swamps. Using Rancid Earth will allow you to destroy a swamp if you come against an opponent who is splashing black, and you do need to kind of color screw them a little bit. You can do that. Now the Threshold is another nice thing. If you look here, let's enlarge this. If you have Threshold, which is 7 or more cards in your graveyard, that is, you destroy the land and it deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. Now that is enough to, if you're playing against mono white, you will kill a lot of creatures, and you've kind of reached a stalemate where they've got a lot of 1/1s on the board. You will kill those, and you don't really stand a chance of losing much to those. To these spells in your own thing. You will have the Ravenous Rats can die to it, and an untransformed Delver, so be aware of that. But being able to do that extra damage to creatures may be what you need to get you over the edge. You attack holding the earth in hand, let damage go, so someone is at 3 toughness and now has 2 damage. You can use the Rancid Earth to get that extra damage in to finish it off. So, I am kind of leaning towards Rancid Earth, even though I used to run Choking Sands as my favorable land destruction spell. Now, this is something you definitely want to bring in, especially against any of the post decks. Use it to kill off Cloud Post specifically. You can use it to kill off the Glimmer Post if you want to stop the life gain, but usually if you want to really try and mana hose someone, you will hit the Cloud Posts. Another use of this is the Fissure Storm. Those use the Ravnica lands, as you see here, the double producing Ravnica lands as kind of their mana engine, in contrast to the untap abilities of Snap and Cloud of Fairies, so you want to use those for that as well. Also for the control matchup, bringing in 4 Duress. This works well against Storm as well. If you get a Duress on turn 1 and you can get rid of that Empty the Warrens, then he's kind of stuck drawing and looking for that spell. It also, like I said, works good against the control package. You can get rid of counter spells early on. Um, Sometimes they will choose to counterspell it, and that's just doing your job for you. So, and last but not least here, we do have 3 dispels. Again, I think this is a good addition for the counterspell matchup. When you run into heavy control, heavy counter control, it is dispel is a great addition, but be aware at least that they will probably bring in some dispels of their own. You don't want to necessarily bring these in for Storm because they are instant. I did kind of stumble over that in my first kind of coming out and trying some of these competitive control decks, is that I brought Dispel in against Storm, and it's not really a beneficial card. So just keep that in mind. It's more for your control matchups. Alright, so there you go. That is what I'm calling DimirDelver version 1.0. Keep an eye on the puremtgo.com. Check out my articles, and you may see this one again. Like I said, I am thinking of revisiting it. Kind of what I was talking about there, just to give you a heads up, is the fact that you are running 21 lands, but the creature package is a little heavy. The idea with Delver is that you want to have as few creatures, you want to maximize the number of instants or sorceries so that he flips more often. So I'm kind of doing that. I'm beneficial sitting on 21 lands only, but the creature package is 18 creatures. Now this can run you a little heavy for the Delvers. That leaves you with only 21 instants or sorceries. And you see, I didn't make anything in this deck outside of creatures and outside of lands that was not a sorcery or instant. In other words, there are no artifacts, there are no enchantments, because those would not flip the Delver. So yeah, I may revisit this, may try and reduce the creature package down a little more, but that's just something to keep in mind if anyone takes this deck list and they want to play with it a little bit. That's kind of what I'm thinking of doing, is reducing the creature package. But the deck works pretty well, and I'm going to showcase you a couple of games here so you can check that out. So let's open up into this first game, shall we? With the Delver deck, we have a pretty good opening hand here. We have the option for a turn 1 bear. It's not a turn 1 Delver, but you can't say no to a turn 1 2/2. And then you see here, for whatever reason, I was trying to talk to someone else while doing this, and accidentally decided to mulligan that hand. So now I'm sitting with a not so good hand. I'm sitting on 4 lands and 2 draw spells. But I don't want to end up dropping cards anymore. I figure at least I'm on the draw. It's gonna at least mitigate somewhat my horrible mistake. That's okay. Everyone runs into these issues, but I just did want to show this game anyways, because it's got an interesting deck first off, and an interesting play by my opponent. But we'll see that later on. Anyways, so we start off with the land. You see, I draw yet another land. Nothing I like to see here. My opponent is playing mono blue. It seems at this point in time he's searching out lands. You see this kind of stuff going on. You're wondering what exactly he's ramping up to. Probably Crushers, probably Condescend, something like that. But game must go on, and I'm going to play the Aqueducts, get those in play as soon as possible. He cycles another Sandbar. He's clearly searching for something. Puts down a Tranquil Thicket. Very interesting. Did not expect to see anything like this in Tournament Practice Room, but you run into the weirdest things all the time. Let me say, if you read my articles, I am constantly complaining about the fact that I find more tournament decks in the more casual area than I do in the Tournament Practice Room. Does that make sense? I'm going to assume it did. But anyways, so this is my opponent's deck. He's doing green-blue, and that's kind of interesting. I always like something different. Draw into a Delver, and I have the option to put that into play, but I'm going to decide instead to kind of use the Consult as a discard. Like I said, my opponent is clearly searching for something. You can tell with all the cycle lands that he has, that he's going to be looking for something. So I'm assuming there's some kind of combo in there, and I want to get rid of whatever he's got in his hand. You see, he gets rid of yet another Lonely Sandbar and a Moment's Peace. So I am very curious at this point in time while playing as to what he was running. I know later on these Moment Peace will be a bit of an issue, but hopefully we can get around that. So Delver is finally going to come into play, and I'm going to use the Preordain. I see both lands, and those are going on the bottom. I've got enough lands at this point in time. Now I could play a bear, but I think it's more important I will leave the mana open for Agony Warp, since I have no clue what my opponent is playing. You always want to just be prepared for whatever may come down and not overextend yourself. So now he plays a Ruin Expedition, and that's kind of an interesting thing. Again, I really don't know where he's going with this, but he's clearly trying to draw into something specific. Excuse me, so, choking over here. So I do want to be aware of this and kind of hold counter spells if I draw them. So Delver comes up and sees another Delver. Not exactly what you want to do. And you will actually see in this deck, this is kind of, I like to showcase matches that have important pieces to them that I can kind of comment on. And one of this, it's not so much a positive thing, but it is an important thing. I do say this is the first version of this deck, and I will be coming back to it when I have time to really focus in on making some changes. But as is, it really works well right now. It just needs a few tune-ups before it would get to any kind of level of competitive play. And part of that is the fact that the Delvers have not... There's a 21 spell base for this deck, so that's your odds are basically a third of a Delver kind of popping up. And please don't get me on that math there, but just on a generic base, 20 spells that are non-creature, and that leaves... 40. Yeah, sorry. See, math, not good. 40 spells that are creatures or lands, and your odds are not perfect for Delver, but they still do hit it most of the time, and you do have some options such as Think Twice. This is kind of another thing that I wanted to point out with this deck. With Think Twice, when you have these abilities, don't just auto-yield these, because what you'll be able to do, you have the first Delver goes on the stack. This is in reference to multiples. So the first Delver is going to go on the stack, and it reveals to me a Drake. That's not what I want to see. It's not going to get this first one transformed. But what you can do in response, you let that clear, you can cast Think Twice to draw the Drake off the top, and then hope that the second Delver is going to hit it. And so we draw the Drake and reveal the second card, and it is a bear. So I did not get lucky enough, but I do have... Let's pop this open. I do have Think Twice in my graveyard, so I will have the ability to do this again next turn. If my first Delver does not hit it, I can pop that off. And that would be an argument if you wanted for using Brainstorm instead of Preordain. But I like the Preordain better as far as rearranging the top. But just something to keep in mind here that... the Think Twice, as you see here, can be used to try and manipulate the top of your deck and benefit the Delvers. Now I'm going to swing here. I really don't care if he chooses to sacrifice the Elder instead of grabbing a land, because that will just allow me to play my Drake on this turn. I'm more than happy to trade those, even though you really want the Delvers to flip, just because it allows me to get the Drake in play, which is a bit of a bigger toughness, so to say. So he decides not to. He does want the land, and I'm more than happy to let him get it as well. He's really searching for something. You can clearly see that. It's siphoning those lands out, as I always talk about. And now I'm going to have the option to put out the bears I have in my hand. Like I said, he's searching for something, so you really want to kind of get the damage in as fast as possible before he finds whatever he's looking for. And it's going to be tricky too. You saw already the one Moment's Peace. I'm imagining he has more in his hand, something along those lines. So, Delver time again. First thing comes up, Ravenous Rats. Bummer. Now I will use the option to use Think Twice in hopes of getting something better. And this Delver reveals to me a swamp. So I'm not doing too good on the luck with the Delver, but I do get the rats into play. I leave myself mana open for Agony Warp, and he is going to be able to counter that. And you see he did play Arcane Denial, so right now you see he's looking for a lot of land fetch. He's doing a lot of draw. Again, I'm playing this, I'm getting more and more curious as this went along. But, you want to get as much damage in as possible. You see here he plays Respite. It is like Moment's Peace, prevent all combat damage and gain 1 damage per creature attacking. Bummer. So he's clearly running several different spells as far as preventing damage. So, again, stall for time, find whatever combo piece it is he's looking for. So he's going to draw cards. I'm going to use this to take the 2. There are situations where you wouldn't want to take the 2 or not draw at all. but I definitely want to take the 2. It can be a bit of a debate, but I'm really not doing too good on my Delvers, so I'm just guessing that the top cards would not be instants that I would lose. So he plays a land, gets that final counter on his expedition, and is going to be able to sacrifice that to find 2 draw cards and find what he's looking for through this muddle in the mixture. So, I'm looking at this and I was not quite sure what he was going for with 2 mana, but now, as soon as he reveals it, I get it. It all makes sense to me now. The card draw, he wants to trigger off Erasure, get the lands thinned out so he can get it. You saw Stall for Time. Even his counter spells are causing you to draw. And this is, just from personal experience, I find if you run across Arcane Denial, either it's all your opponent has, or he's running some kind of Erasure deck. So, I guess maybe I should have known, but, now I definitely want to get in as much damage as possible. So, Delvers are coming up again. And this time around, I don't have an option to draw off the top, so I'm lucky to get the Preordained, and I can flip both of these, which is great, because like I just said, I'm in that point where now I need as much damage as possible to be going off for my opponent here. And he's tapped out, so I know he's not going to be able to get any prevention. The rats, he countered that they're in the grave, so I will be able to play the Drake on this turn as well, and use that as my removal from the grave. Preordained, pretty nice. I already see this warp is going to be useless. It seems that he is playing a creatureless deck. There's really no need when he has all these prevention spells. So when I see the other warp there, I put it on the bottom. I could put the bears on top, but I decided not to. I figured that I already have these 2 creatures in hand. It should be enough. I really wanted to find a counter spell. At this point in time, he's, like I said, I've got the creatures to do the damage. I've got the Delvers flipped. What I need is a counter spell so I can take the opportunity to prevent a Respite or a Moment's Peace and actually get damage through to finish him off. I'm going to have enough damage between the bear and the Drake to do that, in addition to what's on the table. So I really wanted to get a counter spell. I'm going to use Necrosages, cause him to discard, figuring, as you see, he had a Moment's Peace. I figured he had some kind of stall spell like that in hand, that I want to just do whatever I can to make sure my damage actually hits. So here you see Drake comes down, removing the rats, the bear comes down. And now it's up to my opponent. He's going to draw and mill a card off, and one card's not so bad, it's the rest of it that's going to bother me. So here comes Chittering Rats. I figure this will slow him down a little more. If that is a Moment's Peace, he will only have the ones in his grave that he's allowed to use. But it turns out it is another Arcane Denial. He will draw. And this is almost a tricky situation. With the Erasure in hand, you kind of debate whether or not you want to draw this card. I do decide that I want to draw 2. I am sitting currently at 38 cards. I figure I can take 2 right now, and it shouldn't be too bad. You see here he did flashback a Moment's Peace to prevent all that damage, so he is still sitting at 12. You could, in response, this says up to 2 cards, so you could take only 1, you could take 0, but again, because I was sitting so well on cards, I decided it was worth taking them. You have the Unearths, which will allow me to bring back the rats, but there's really not an opportunity to cycle this. You do want to be somewhat conservative when it comes to drawing cards, because you are being milled. So I'm going to use it to bring back the rats and any creature he may be able to kill instead of cycling those. You see here, I did luck into drawing finally a Mana Leak. So it's not the greatest counterspell because he has quite a bit of mana on the table, and I will not, I will have to wait for a point in time where he does not have 3 open. So this is where, this was kind of one of the highlights I wanted to bring to this video, as well as, just the fact that my opponent had an interesting deck. So I'm swinging here 6 creatures. He plays a Keep Watch. Now this is kind of a cool thing that will cause there to be 6 draws and 6 triggers of the Erasure. Now at this point in time, I expect that he's going to be able to flash back a Moment's Peace or something that he drew. And this is where I think he kind of makes a misstep. One of the things he apparently drew was another Keep Watch. Now what he's done is guaranteed himself a Respite or Moment's Peace in hand that he can cast for 2 mana, but what he doesn't realize is that I have Mana Leak. So he has now tapped himself out to the point where he can prevent the damage, as you see here. He will play a respite and try to prevent the damage, but it really doesn't matter because I have the counterspell. I will be able to stop it. Had my opponent played that a little better, saved the keep watch for next turn instead of been greedy, this damage would have been prevented, and who knows, he might have been able to mill me out before this game was over. So we'll just fast forward here. He is going to be able to mill a total of 12 cards off the top of my deck, which, like I said, puts me at 21. He would have been in a good position later on if he did not get greedy and play both. I mean, I guess I could have attacked with less creatures. It's 12 damage. I should have, this is probably my mistake, brought back some creatures, attacked with enough to do 12 and win the game. Now that I know he has keep watch, but not knowing that, all out, what the hell, he's not running creatures. And it did still cost my opponent in the end because he made that misstep and tapped out so that my mana leak would do damage. So let's take a look at this example game here. This is my opening hand, and in most cases would not be ideal since there is only one land, but having both the bear and the delver, I decided to keep it. I can hope for a land draw on my second turn. If I do not get it, then odds are that card that is on top will transform the delver, and I'm still in a pretty good place. I'll have the 3/2 flyer, and I can play the bear. So we say here that my opponent is playing the mono-white aggro deck. Bodyguard will be trouble with the warp later on, and the delver reveals a land. So I'm not really in a bad spot. That still gives me options. I will put out the Ravenous Rats on this turn, and hope to transform the delver next time around. Turn 2, my opponent brings out the Suture Priest. Again, not too concerned about it. Can't kill it just yet because if I do, he has the bodyguard to prevent that. So turn 3 comes around, I'm finally able to transform the delver using the Preordain. Not a third land drop, but I'm okay with that. Now I swing with both. The rats did its job. Now I'm hoping to either get one extra damage in there or use it to force my opponent to chump block with a creature. That's a pretty easy trade to make. So after damage is done, I do have a couple options. I could play the bear. I do decide to instead use Preordain. It gives me an opportunity to find that third mana so I do not miss the land drop on this turn. It shows the mana leak I'm going to put on the bottom, and now I kind of made a hasty decision. When I cast the Preordain, the first thing I'm thinking is I want to find an island, and I'm kind of tunnel visioned on I want to find an island so that I can play the bear on this turn, and then have the mana open for Drake later. So in my hasty decision, I decide to put the swamp on the bottom. I get a second Agony Warp, which is not bad because I am playing an aggro deck, but I could have been able to play Chittering Rats on the next turn had I not made that mistake. So you do that kind of thing, and you just hope it doesn't hurt you later on. So now my opponent misses his third land drop, but with the Skyfisher he's able to bounce that land and replay it, and have 1 mana open, which he will use for Bone Splitter. It's never a good thing to be sitting across from Bone Splitter plus Skyfisher. He's got the evasion. If I have to, I can chump block with the transformed Delver, but you don't want that to happen. So still didn't draw a third land, but I will try to Agony Warp. At this point in time, he can sacrifice the bodyguard to prevent this. He didn't this time, but if he did, I would have the option to Agony Warp on the following turn to get rid of it. So that leaves it free and clear to swing with the transformed one. I decide to leave the rat untapped so that I can chump block if he decides to do another attack. He does actually get another Skyfisher, will, again, since he missed his third land drop, be able to replay a Plains. Now here you're like, okay, he's going to attach the Bone Splitter, but it's actually worse, he does get a second one. And, Skyfisher plus Bone Splitter wasn't bad enough, now he's got a second one in play. So I finally draw land number 3. Let's open up the graveyard here because I cannot play the Drake yet, as you notice, because I do not have a creature in graveyard. So I will have the option to cast the Think Twice. In this case, I'm going to use Agony Warp to try and kill the Skyfisher in hopes that he F6s or whatever again. This time he does use the bodyguard to protect it. So I will just be resigned to playing the bear and passing the turn. Opponent finally makes his third land drop. And you see here it's not attaching. He's going to actually have unmake. He's going to get rid of the Delver, so he can swing clear with that. Kind of a bad thing against the mono-white matchup is the fact that their removal spells are removed from game, and not a kill spell that would send the creature to the graveyard, so it makes these Drakes a little weaker. You notice he kind of didn't attack, he stayed back, playing a little too cautious in my opinion, especially when you're playing an aggro deck. You want to be a more aggressive player. So my only option here is to use the Think Twice. I leave the blue mana open, and you want to remember this, that your 1-drops are in blue, so you leave that open in case you drew into a Delver or another bear. And you'll be able to play it on that turn. So now I drew into another Agony Warp, so I'm sitting pretty good. I can kill that Skyfisher on my next turn. Things get worse. He's got the Golem in play now, and he has the mana open to attach the 2 Bone Splitters. Usually I'm not an advocate of putting them all in the same creature, but in this case, because I have no blockers, he does, and we'll get through for 6. So this time I draw a Delver, which is great, because when I play the Agony Warp, I will have, I can play both, that is, I have the 1 blue left over, and we'll put the Delver into play. Hopefully I can get it transformed, and then I can double block on the Golem. Now I wait till here my opponent's phase, so that he attacks with this, thinking he's going to sneak 6 through, and then I can use Agony Warp. Since it's during the combat phase, he does not have the option to attach the Bone Splitters to another creature. This way I'm taking, minimal damage. And I will kill it here, and have the opportunity to, you see, chump block with the rats so that it will die, and I now have an opportunity to put a Drake into play. You see here my opponent was lucky or had it in hand, but either way he's got another Skyfisher. Troubled Waters ahead, because these are kind of the bigger beats you will face in the mono-white matchup, and with the 2 Bone Splitters it's really tough to beat here. He does attach the Bone Splitters. You see he does decide to split them at this point in time. Delver comes around, and I do hit another island, so that's not what I wanted to see, but I have the opportunity to put the Drake into play and remove the rat from the game. I skipped the island drop. That's an iffy call. You can do it so you have mana available later on to, think twice plus play another spell. I kind of like to hold it in hand, usually because your opponent may think it's a counterspell when you're playing control. Here it was just kind of a silly move because he already saw it with the Delver, or he would have seen it with the Delver, and if you auto remove, so you just want to be aware of these things as you're playing. Now he's gonna come through. I'm going to use the Drake to block and kill the Skyfisher, and that will give me another creature in the graveyard to play the second Drake. Now this turn I do top deck the card I need to flip the Delver, and this time I will put the island into play so that I can cast the Drake and use Preordain. And now I have the option to block his Golem with both flyers and kill it. So here are my options. I still don't have the second black, so I'm not going to take the rat. That's going to go on bottom. And I put the island at the bottom as well, but I still draw into another island, so that's just bad luck. But hey, it's thinning the land out of my deck at the very least. So my opponent again splits the Bone Splitters and decides to attack, and I'm going to have to chump block with the bear when I double block with the other 2 creatures. So this puts me in a pretty good position. It's going to clear his board. I'm only going to lose the Drake. The bear was kind of just acting as a chump blocker in this matchup currently. I still have my Delver in play. I draw the Swamp and can now play the Chittering Rats to slow down my opponent. He's only got 2 cards in hand. I said this in one of my other videos if you checked out my series about Esper Aggro, but one of the advantages you have against mono white is they do not have a serious draw engine. So if you can kind of empty their hand, you've slowed them to a crawl. The other key to that is keeping the board clear. But now I can swing through, get some easy damage in play. My opponent, 1 card in hand, draws a second, and at least one of those was a land, so I'm still sitting pretty good. I can swing for 5. Now I make a great top deck here with the Unearth.
I can swing for 5 again, drop my opponent to 9. He does not have an unmake. The only other removal they end up usually having in mono white is Journey to Nowhere, which he cannot play on my turn. But I have the Unearth in play. I will use it to bring back the Drake. Now, because I am not casting the Drake necessarily, it comes into play and I don't have to worry about removing a creature. If I did, I had the bear, so it wasn't really a big deal. But the Drake is kind of a free play for 1 black at this point, and I have the mana open. I can use Think twice at the end of my opponent's turn. So here we go, my opponent draws again, 2 cards in hand, and we'll play another Plains. So he's kind of gotten a bad draw this time. He got a really good start, but I was able to stem the tide thanks to drawing 3 out of 4 Agony Warps. To my benefit, not his. Play the Think twice, get another rat. I will use it to clear whatever is out of his hand. In response, he's going to actually cast it, and that turns out to be the Strands. That's usually a sideboard card for mono white. I guess he's decided that it's more prevalent to have it in the first game, maybe give you a better matchup to get that first game win. So I'm okay with that. He's going to choose blue. Will prevent damage from the Drake and the Delver. I'll just leave those guys at home and swing for 2 with the rat. I've also been able to leave the mana open so that I can cast Soul Manipulation later on. He draws here, and he's going to actually be able to cast the Guardian of the Gale Pact, but like I said, I left the mana open. I did draw the Soul Manipulation, so I will play that and choose the bears. You see now, even though my opponent got me to 3 life, he's out of answers, he's got no blockers, and I'm going to be able to swing for the win on next turn, so he decides to concede. A bit of a lucky draw on my part, but I was able to stem the tide of my opponent. You really want to be able to do that in the aggro matchup and slow him down enough that you can swing for the win.